Yes, this is the envelope that I received.
Okay, and how is it that you recall that this was the specific envelope you received?
It bears the DR number as well as the number 1, meaning it is item number 1 booked to that DR number. On the back side of the envelope, it has my initials, my stylized initials, my serial number, as well as the date that I opened the package.
Okay, I see it. What I have frozen up on the screen there, is that the front side of the envelope?
Yes.
And putting up the back side, are these the initials that you were referring to?
Yes.
All right. Take out the smaller envelope. I'm going to show you the back side of the smaller envelope. You need me to approach the tape's obscuring it, let me know, but did you receive this smaller envelope as well when you did your examination?
Yes, it bears my stylized initials and information.
Are they up here just below the tape?
Yes, that's where I marked the envelope when I opened it.
Okay. Then lastly, you take the 2 items out of the smaller envelope. Up here. You can approach with these. You tell us that these are the firing cartridge cases that you examined in this case.
Yes, their external features match the features that I documented. And there are also engravings on the inside of the actual cartridge case. When I receive evidence, I will engrave it with the item number, portion of that DR number, my initials and serial number inside the mouth of the case where it will not obscure the marks.
So that you know later that they're the same ones you looked at.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to put them back. Smaller envelope. Back in the larger envelope of People's 32. So after you received that envelope and those specific cartridge cases, what's the next step that you take in your examination process?
So the next step is going to be filling out some worksheets with the basic observations and features that are observable on those items. Both of these were booked as item 1, so I did designate one of the 2 as item 1A, the other as 1B. Then I documented the material and general features that we will systematically do in the opening stages of an examination.
Okay, and then the next step after documentation, what did you do?
So that point would just be to sort of classify those actual markings that were observed, the aperture shape, the firing pin shape, and these are just outlined in preparation for the interpretation part of the actual analysis.
Okay, so you talked about in your prior testimony looking for those 3 class characteristics: the aperture shape, the firing pin shape, and the caliber, correct?
Yes, among others, but these are the most prominent and useful.
Okay. So is that what you're talking about when you look at them in the laboratory? You're documenting each one of those class characteristics.
Yes.
All right. So I'm going to go back to your presentation here. Now you're going to start talking about the specifics of this case, correct?
Correct.
All right. Let's start with slide 40. Can you describe for the jury what we see here?
Yes, so the photo at the right side of this this slide is a digital image that is from the computer database system. This was, it's called NIBIN, N-I-B-I-N. This was taken before my actual analysis, but it's a good depiction of what I was looking at. In this picture, I've got the numbers 1, 2, and 3 there. So first, I've categorized the actual caliber. It is a 9 Luger caliber cartridge. Looking at the imprint on this of the aperture, I classified that as teardrop shaped. Looking closer into that actual depression in the primer, I classified the shape of the firing pin as also being teardrop shaped. So in the bottom left, there's a simple diagram outlining those features that I observed.
Okay. Let's go on to the next area. If you would describe sort of the value of the class characteristics that you observed, that information you just talked about.
Right, so now I'm beginning the interpretation stage of the examination. That first stage, here illustrated on the first line next to the one, is the determination of caliber. That was 9mm Luger. This is very common. In our lab, it's the most common caliber that we run into. So while that is interesting, it narrows our pool of candidate firearms to some extent. It's still a very common feature. Down at line 2, I'm then going to move to begin to interpret what does the teardrop shaped aperture mean. How does that allow me to further restrict the list of candidate sources?
Okay. Let's move on then. If you would talk about after you document those 3 features, those 3 class characteristics, what's the next step that you took?
So at this stage, it becomes a bit of a research project. I'm using literature from my field in order to get the broadest list of known candidate sources with a teardrop-shaped firing pin aperture. Left side here is depicted just a couple of articles that I used. These are from the Journal of the Association of Firearm and Toolmark Examiners. This is a peer-reviewed journal that's been in print since 1968, I believe. A few of these articles started me down that path. There is also an electronic forum that's operated by AFTE. It's available to AFTE members, AFTE, Association of Firearm and Toolmark Examiners. This is an electronic exchange for professional examiners in a members area of the AFTE website. It allows them to interact and exchange information about new observations that they have with casework. And this is more responsive than the actual articles. We can disseminate information quicker by those means.
And these were the sources you used to kind of determine how big the pool was of potential candidates to compare to those 3 features you talked about.
Correct. I'm just looking for a list of suspect guns, if you will, brands which we know to include just that one feature, the teardrop-shaped firing pin aperture.
Okay. So it was specific to the firing pin aperture.
Correct.
All right. Let's move on. What was the next step you took?
The next resource I used is called the Class Characteristics Matrix. This is a developing database, also operated by AFTE. It allows me to just, you may enter different features, such as caliber and firing pin aperture shape. I did so in order to try to broaden that list of potential makes known to the community to produce teardrop-shaped firing pin apertures.
Okay. After looking at those resources, what did you determine was the potential list of firearm manufacturers that could have contributed to that aperture shape?
Right. So from all the manufacturers operating, the list that is known to me as a result of consulting these sources comes down to just a list of about 5 different manufacturers. So we've narrowed that candidate group considerably just using that one feature. These images there are logos or images depicting those 5 sources.
Okay, so you went from 9mm, very common source, to now whittling it down to 5 manufacturers, just with the aperture shape, correct?
That's right.
Okay. If you would talk about the kind of next step in your research project.
So moving from the aperture now to the actual firing pin. At this point, it becomes a little more challenging because the firing pin that I'm looking at in this case just happens to be quite distinctive. Fortunately, several months before the occurrence date of this case, I initiated a project where I collected samples from firearms that were coming through the firearm unit. We regularly test fire pistols that come into LAPD custody to be entered into the NIVEN database. I collected 229 different firearms examples, and these are specifically what we call ghost guns. It's a new sort of phenomena of firearms. By examining the samples from those this sample set, I was able to locate a few species that actually exhibited the firing pin consistent with the one that I observed in this case.
The teardrop shape, correct?
Teardrop-shaped firing pin, correct.
Okay. And when you add that class characteristic to your analysis, so now you've gone from caliber, you narrowed some out with the aperture shape, and now you've added in those that have the same aperture shape and this unique firing pin shape. What were you left with?
Right, so I'm left with the logo there you see on the left is not an actual manufacturer, it's just representing what we call ghost guns. So there's one particular aftermarket slide which is common to a particular frame size of ghost gun. That particular product exhibited the firing pin shape that I observed on the evidence. It also has some compatibility with frames that are produced by Glock.
Okay. Before we talk about ghost guns, you mentioned NIVEN. Would you describe for the jurors what that is and how you used it specifically in this case?
Sure. We may be more familiar with DNA databases. Samples from a crime scene may go into a database. Samples from suspects will also go into the database. The computer will attempt to match samples and potential suspects. We have a similar database in firearm identification. This is called NIVEN, the National Integrated Ballistics Information Network. So when we have a group of evidence cartridge cases, such as the ones in this case, we can enter it into the system and attempt to look for potential matches among tens of thousands of candidates that are in that system. At the conclusion of my examination, I took the actual items that were previously imaged into the NIVEN system and had them correlated again. This means those images of our evidence were searched against the database again in order to see if I could find any other makes of firearms depicting that particular firing pin shape.
You described using the AFI resources, or the resources from your association of other tool mark examiners. Would NIVEN essentially have been kind of like a double check to your research that you did on the AFI resources?
Right, so the AFI resources, I'm trying to expand my list of possible candidates. I expanded that list, and those resources also told me what types of firing pins I expected to see. I didn't just take that at face value. I went, looked through NIVEN in order to attempt to confirm whether those resources were accurate. According to the samples that I looked at on this database, they were as is advertised or published in those resources. Finally, I use NIBIN again as a second sort of double check, putting our actual evidence in and seeing if there are any other brands I'm unaware of that had similar marks.
Now let's talk about ghost guns. You've used that term a couple times. If you would describe what a ghost gun is.
Sure. Well, this slide sort of depicts I guess, mainstream way of manufacturing and distributing firearms. So they're typically made by a licensed manufacturer, shipped to a retailer that has a federal firearms license, and they're sold to us in public from that retailer. So that is how typical guns are distributed. I say guns of typical manufacturer as opposed to the species that are commonly referred to as ghost guns.
Okay, moving on to that. Can you describe what you are illustrating here?
Right, so the ghost gun species uses a frame that is the portion you're going to grip. This is the part that needs to be serialized and controlled if it is manufactured and shipped to you, the consumer. Ghost guns use a product that is an incomplete frame. It requires you as the consumer to make just a few adjustments, drill a few holes in order to make that frame operational. You can order these over the internet. You can also order what's depicted there. The frame here is in that pink color. You're also going to need the other firing components, such as the slide and the barrel. These can also be ordered online. Then, using simple hand tools, as most of us would have in our garage, these aftermarket parts can be assembled and to produce a functional gun. Now, this gun does not have a serial number in that state, because when it was shipped, when the frame was shipped from that manufacturer, it was shipped in an unfinished condition, which did not require it to have a serial number. This is where the term ghost gun, I think, has taken hold, because it does not have that serial number that's known to law enforcement.
You talked about the three parts of the gun, and you said the pink part that you have illustrated up there is the frame. What are the other two parts? The gray rectangular shape on the top and the kind of orangish cylindrical piece underneath the pink part.
These are the main other components. Okay, so the pink part is that frame. That orange tubular shaped item is the barrel. That is where you load the cartridge, and that's where the bullet's actually going to travel, go towards the target. The gray object at the top of this image, that's the slide. It contains the breech face and the mechanism associated with the firing pin. Marks on the cartridge case are primarily coming from that component, the slide component of the firearm.
And are you illustrating that you can essentially purchase these individual pieces separately? So you could just buy a frame, you just wanted the frame?
Correct. You could buy the kit that can be used to produce a frame, and then the other components can be purchased separately from various retailers.
Okay. If you already have a working firearm, but you want to exchange a piece like the slide for the frame, can you do that by removing a piece and then adding an aftermarket piece?
Yes, you can. Just like my car has a license plate, it's licensed. I can change the rims on my car. I can buy aftermarket ones and slap it on there. That's what we're essentially allowed to do with these components of the gun outside of the frame itself.
Okay. One. I think you already described they can be assembled using hand tools. What are you illustrating here in slide number 5?
So this just illustrates a couple actual products that are out there for privately made firearms is one of the terms the slang is ghost gun. These products show some tooling that can be used to actually complete the manufacture and make the kit, which is sold into a functional frame that can be joined with a aftermarket slide and used as firearm.
You said there's two brands that are illustrated up there. What are the two brands?
These are two very common brands. One is at the bottom center is Polymer 80 with the P80 logo. There is another brand, the firearm is marketed as an SS80, and that's depicted in the top right portion of the slide.
Okay. All right, moving on. Would you discuss kind of the manufacture or the features of some of these ghost guns?
Right, so this image is depicting the fact that these kits are produced to mimic a typical gun that's already in mainstream production. So there are two actual models here that are listed there. On the left-hand side, there's a SS80 is one. There's a PF9SS. That's another. These two particular ghost gun frames are compatible with a particular model of Glock, and that Glock is called a Glock 43. So they are made to be sort of imitation frames of that Glock, and they're compatible with those aftermarket parts which are also compatible with that particular model of mainstream manufactured Glock.
So when you were first explaining to us how kind of the origins of what a ghost gun is, you contrasted that to a gun that came from a licensed manufacturer. Am I stating that correctly?
Yes.
Would the Glock 43 being produced by the Glock Firearm Company, would that be what you're talking about as being produced by a mainstream licensed manufacturer?
Yes.
And the ones that you have listed here on the left, the Polymer 80 BF9SS and the Glock SOR SS80, would those be the ghost gun versions of a Glock 43?
Correct. These are the privately made firearm or ghost gun versions of the frame of a Glock 43.
Made to mimic a Glock 43?
Yes.
Okay. All right. What are you illustrating here?
So here it showed one set of aftermarket parts just illustrated there. The markings I found on these evidence items can be linked to a particular aftermarket slide. This particular aftermarket slide is known to be compatible with a few models of firearm frames. These include the Glock 43, 43X, on the left-hand side, that's depicted by that dark black colored frame. On the right-hand side, the pink frame is representing the ghost gun equivalents of that Glock frame, which may be marketed as the SS80 or PF9SS.
In your explanation just now, you said the evidence items that you examined. Are you talking about these cartridge cases that were item 1 that exhibit People's 32?
That's right.
Okay. And you're saying that the class characteristics that you saw on these cartridge cases, those three characteristics, that it was 9mm, that it had a teardrop-shaped aperture, and a teardrop-shaped firing pin impression, those are the characteristics you were using to narrow it down to these 4 types of firearms?
Yes, that grouping of class characteristics is known to me through those resources. I've only been able to associate it with this one particular aftermarket slide. And this aftermarket slide is compatible brands and models are listed there.
Those four, right?
Yes.
Okay. Well, let's talk about your finding, or the conclusion to your analysis. Have you summarized your conclusion on this slide, equals 59? Go back to.
Yes. Final conclusion, what you're not going to find in the report, I cannot say this configuration only comes from brand X. What we know is that after some considerable research, I can give you the list of candidates that we know to be consistent with these items. While these are consistent, we cannot really say that these are the only ones which will ever be manufactured with those general features. Due to that, the qualifying term, but not limited to, always appears in type and caliber findings, such as the ones I produced.
Okay. So why is it, again, that you put that qualifying statement in your analysis? Because, correct me if I'm wrong, but you stated 9mm is a very common caliber, correct?
Yes.
But at the end of your type and caliber analysis, you really narrowed it down to those three features were only really typical of 4 different firearms that you have seen come through your laboratory, through your research on the AFNI resources, and cross-comparing that with NIBIN. Am I stating that accurately?
Yes. Based on the research that I've described, I have only encountered empirical evidence showing me that this grouping of class characteristics exists as a consequence of that particular aftermarket slide. That's all the information that I could determine after some relatively considerable evidence.
But you don't limit it to just those 4 firearms, fair to say?
Correct. You can't state that it's those 4 and only those 4, because these class characteristics are voluntarily chosen by the manufacturers. They can change. It's also possible that there are other items out there that we have not run into. Any research material I use is finite. So for that reason, we include that qualifying mark to be overt.
But after your research in this area, you narrowed it to 4 that you, those 4 different firearms were the only that you could find that had those 3 class characteristics among them, correct?
Objection has to answer.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Your Honor. That's correct. I'm only aware of the aftermarket product that's compatible with those 4 models.
Okay, that's all I have, Your Honor.
All right, we'll take a 15-minute break, folks. Please be outside, report indoors at, let's make it 3:20. Please don't discuss the